from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. Welcome to Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music. And now, here's your host, Scott Edgar.
Welcome to our next episode of Teaching Social and Emotional Learning Through Music. Now, most of the time when I come into an episode, I have a really good idea about what we're going to talk about. Well, friends, today we're going to delve into an area that I don't know a ton about. I don't know a lot about body mapping. I don't know a ton about body awareness. So when we don't know a lot about something, what do? We talk to people who do know a lot about something, and we are so fortunate today to be joined by Jackie McIlwain and Shawn Copeland, who literally wrote the book on body mapping for clarinetists. Jackie and Shawn, thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Oh, our honor. Such an honor to have you here today. And just to be blunt, it's always a pleasure to bring in friends from GIA Publications who are doing great work. Jackie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. So I am a clarinetist. I teach at the University of Southern Mississippi. I've been here for about 11 years. I got into body mapping when I was an undergrad, and as well as Alexander technique. And that's really when I found that this work of somatics can be so helpful in my music making. So I've really taken what I learned in undergrad and grown with it. I was injured as a student, and this helped me kind of gain control over the injury and recover. And so I've been able to go to some great schools and have some wonderful teaching opportunities over the years. And I really thoroughly enjoy bringing both music, clarinet, not both, I guess, but all music, clarinet, and body mapping together and creating some fun opportunities with that.
Jackie, one of my favorite words is embedded, and it sounds like through your journey, you've just found ways that it's necessitated you embedding this work. You said, my body said no, and I needed to find a yes, and you found a yes in some of the work that we're going to talk about today. I can't wait. And to be honest, you mentioned just a few words already that I don't know anything about, so we're going to explore those. Shawn,
right.
Welcome. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I discovered Alexander technique and body mapping as a junior in college. I was a little bit different in that I wasn't injured yet, but I was definitely up against some mental roadblocks in my performance work. And when I discovered Alexander technique at a summer festival, it just opened my mind to understanding a whole different world of performing and how the way that I was thinking really influenced the way that I was performing. And thus, through Alexander work and then discovering body mapping, that brought me into my body, which at that point in time, I didn't even know that I was not in my body. That's the beauty of this work, is that we just don't even know what we're missing until someone says, hey, you know, you have feet. And you go, oh, I do. So I'm a full-time clarinetist. I do teach at the University of Idaho, and also a certified Alexander teacher and certified or licensed body mapping educator. And since finishing my work in 2006 and my certifications, my entire career has been combining Alexander technique, body mapping, and music pedagogy. I've taught at an Easter Music Festival since 2005, and I've had the just amazing opportunity of working with all musicians and all performers, singers, actors, dancers, vocalists, and just how that has allowed me to grow, and all the different information from all those different performance aspects, how they kind of come together, has just been a really amazing opportunity for me.
Shawn, you said something. How I was thinking influences how we perform. And I think for many of us, that needs to be on a t-shirt. That needs to be on a bumper sticker, because, you know, we know countless amount of times that the pressure of a performance might not elicit the best performance, and we're not reflecting upon those experiences. And I think oftentimes we ignore that our body is screaming that we're having a response to this, but there's a lack of an awareness there. We've already just hinted in our few short minutes that we've been on air, hinted at why we can't ignore this. But my big entry question, because I know as a middle school, high school, and now collegiate band director, this isn't something that is front and center on my brain. When I enter a rehearsal, this isn't something that I need to nourish. This isn't something that I need to address. So, as if we didn't have enough information already, why should we worry about this? Why should we be concerned about this? Why is this something that we need to prioritize for our students? Jackie, you want to take first shot?
Sure. So the first thing that I think about is when we're performing music, our whole goal is to communicate to the audience, is to share the music that we're working on, to share the love that we have for it, to communicate what we think the composer was wanting to do, what we're wanting to do as performers. And if we don't have a strong idea of what that is, or how we're feeling about it, or what our body is doing to produce that music, if we're not open to feeling that and experiencing that, it's going to put a wall between us and the audience. And so honing in and like exploring and doing a deep dive, and continually doing a deep dive into body awareness can help you just grow closer to the music and what you're wanting to say as a musician, but also communicating that to the audience.
So what I'm hearing is that if we're not bodily aware, that we're not going to be able to communicate effectively. Shawn, did I get that right?
Yeah. Words mean something, and you'll be able to communicate. But will you be able to communicate everything or all that you're really trying to communicate? Will it be as deep as it could potentially be? Will you make as much of an impact as there's the potential to make? That's really what we're talking about. Is being present in our bodies, being present with our identity. That's what allows us to know who we are, and thus be who we are when we are on stage. And it's that truth that allows us to communicate to others, as opposed to us being some version or some expectation of ourselves that either our teacher or our field dictates that we should be, as opposed to exactly who we are. I think that what we're really talking about is what you often hear some people refer to as the it factor, that special little magic. When I was in college, the phrase was, someone could be on stage reading the phone book to you and you're sitting there salivating over what they're saying. It doesn't matter what they're saying to you. You are in it. You are connected. And that's because they know who they are, and they are present in their bodies. Thus, they are present on the stage and they are present in front of you. And that allows you to be present with them as an audience member.
I love the idea of being present, because I think especially today, our brains go so many different ways. We're in the middle of just so much chaos that to pause and to be present in a moment, to be, whether we're being present as a performer or as an audience member, as a listener, I think that pause is so important. I can't wait to explore that a little bit more. You both spoke about Alexander technique, and I think that that's something that our field has been sniffing at for a really long time. I'll say decades. I remember when I was in high school, I'm a trumpet player, and I was having some serious neck and shoulder issues. And my band director said, hey, you should go check out this Alexander technique specialist in Columbus, Ohio. And I did, and it helped. I'm curious, though. I think it's one of those things, well, similar to SEL, that kind of lives in the ethos that, Alexander technique, but there's not a lot of clarity about what it actually is, what it does, and how it can help. Shawn, can you give us an entry point into Alexander technique?
Sure. Alexander technique is named for an actor by the name of Frederick Matthias Alexander. We refer to him as FM. I believe that's what he went by when he was alive and teaching. And as a young actor, he developed a vocal problem where he was losing his voice on stage, and the doctors at the time couldn't figure out really what was wrong with his voice. And so he stopped acting for a period of time and began to study himself in how he was speaking and how he was acting. He stood in front of a threefold mirror and he made a very important discovery about the body and the way that the body coordinates. And it's a discovery that we share with all vertebrae on this planet, all animals that have a spine. We all move in a particular way, um, and it's that the spine follows the head in movement. Wherever the head goes, the spine follows in sequence. So if you just think about your cat or your dog, kind of getting up and doing a little shake in the morning, the first thing that happens is they start shaking their head, and then that shake goes all the way down through the tail. We are the same way. We are just now bipedal. We're on 2 feet instead of four, and our heads are now at 90-degree angles to our spine. But that principle of movement is still the same. When we go to move, we first expand. We move in all directions. Our spine lengthens, our body will deepen, and our arms and legs will move out and away from our spine. If you think of the Vitruvian Man, we move in that kind of direction. Um, and something happens through our learning, through our experiences in life around 5 or 6, 7 years old, that begins to interfere, or we start to interfere with this movement principle. And it gets buried under lots of, I should do this, and this is the right way, and my teacher told me this. And so we start to put layers and expectations and lots of shoulds on top of that, and we interfere with that basic coordinating principle. So that's the discovery aspect of it. Though those coulds and shoulds and expectations, those become habits that become very difficult to break or to change. And Alexander met this right away. He figured this out, and then he tried to get it going in himself. And then he started, his Shakespeare monologue. And as soon as he looked in the mirror, he was right back into his habit again. He was doing the thing that was interfering with that coordinating principle. And so he developed a process for helping him, and he began to teach this. So helping us overcome our habits, get past our habits. And that process is to become aware, to develop this self awareness that you're talking about, um, to become aware of how we are responding to the stimulus of what we're about to do. Say it's standing up or singing. And we notice I start to prepare for that. If I'm going to stand up right now, the first thing I might do is pull my head down and start leaning forward a little bit. And that's a habit. I don't need to pull myself down to go up out of the chair. If we pause and think about that, that's ridiculous that we would do that. Um, but yet we do. And so the process is for you to become aware of that and then to pause and decide, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to notice that habit and I'm going to say, no, instead I'm going to expand. I'm going to lengthen. I'm going to reconnect to this primary coordination. And then I'm going to go ahead and move out of the chair. And that is the actual Alexander process, which is this idea of awareness, pausing, and direction, change, something different.
Shawn, thank you. My mind goes to so many things that are habits that we do, and we're doing them unconsciously or subconsciously on a daily basis. And as someone who started young musicians in fifth grade on band instruments for many years of my life, I'm feeling a little bit guilty because how many bad habits did I not catch? How many bad habits did I not provide students with the opportunity to say, let's be aware of this and lengthening and some of those really, my mind almost went to the space of that you were cueing some of our ways to think about how our body can function. And that really, so that we're eliminating or at least mitigating as many bad habits as we can, that this is paramount from the very beginning of picking up an instrument so that we're learning good habits.
Yeah, this what you're talking about right now is the aspect that makes Jackie and I's work so pivotal to both the Alexander community and the body mapping community and the music community. We bring a lot of different ideas into the work that we do. We bring a lot of modalities and a lot of other educational certificates um, to this work, and that has helped us really understand the um, this kind of sense of responsibility that you're talking about, where you go, oh, when you learn like, oh, I'm teaching these bad habits or something, and we go, you know, the bottom line is teachers always do the very best they can with the information that they have available to them. Nobody wants to mess anybody up. There's this other factor that is always present, but we don't always identify it when we come into, we're going to say, just a classroom. Um, we come in, we find our tribe around middle school. Usually performers are outcasts in the world. We're slightly different. We know we're slightly different. And then we come into our theater classroom for the first time, or our choir classroom, our band classroom, orchestra, and we're like, these are my people. This is where I belong. And very soon after that, we start to learn that there are conditions for this membership. I need to sit a certain way. I need to breathe a certain way. I need to have a certain kind of behavior in order to continue to be a part of this group. And we begin to make those changes so that we can continue to belong. This is the belonging piece of it. Um, and what Jackie and I learned is that this is an essential part of our nervous system. This is an essential aspect of our nervous system. This is our nervous system making conscious and subconscious choices to keep us safe, because belonging is an inextricable piece of our safety. If we don't belong to our family, to our parents, to our social groups, to our band, to our orchestra, we aren't safe. And so we make these changes for our safety. The thing is we survive. Therefore, it was the right choice. There are no bad habits. It is just what you learned to do to continue belonging to that group. And it worked. It was the best choice available to you. It solved a problem and it progressed you forward. Now, is it the best choice now for you to continue in that? Maybe, maybe not, but it got you here. So it can't be bad. It can't be wrong. It was what it was and you survived. And I think in terms of music education, well, just in terms of education in general, there's so many influences coming that tell us this is the right way, this is the wrong way. We are caught up in this binary world. When it comes to our body, we need to be very, very careful of binaryisms in our body. We don't make decisions based on right or wrong. We make decisions based on safety and survival. And that, if you're here now, it was the right choice. It was the right decision.
Shawn, that what you just said just feels like it's just oozing grace. It's like, well, where we were was where we were. And when we know better, we can do better. I'll channel a little Maya Angelou there. But that's where we were. And as you said, we're still
Still
here.
here.
And I'm sure some of our listeners and viewers right now are thinking, oh, but I wish I knew. I wish I knew. I wish I could go back. I wish I had that time machine so I could know better. But, now me being my huge hulking 5'10" frame going back to middle school basketball again, well, sure, I would do better. But I'm where I am now. Jackie, all of this is getting me to think of what are some things that we as teachers, as facilitators of our next generation of musicians, students, instrumentalists, need to have in our brains. And I'm going to drastically oversimplify this, and I am so sorry that I'm going to do this, but just in the time that we have, are there a few things that as teachers that if you had to say, wow, I so wish our music educators would be more aware of these 2 or 3 things when they're in a classroom to set them up for success? What would those few things be, Jackie?
So the first thing that comes to mind is realizing that yes, we're educators, but we're also students. We need to, I think, to be the best teachers we can be, we can continually learn and continually push ourselves to seek more information, to be curious, to explore. And my son right now is actually in beginning band, and I absolutely love watching him come home with his French horn, and he is just playing him. He brings a friend over and they're playing French horn, and they're like, oh, what kind of sounds can I make? And they're like making elephant sounds and having a blast. And I started recording it because I was like, this is really special. This is exploring, this is seeing what's possible. And so it was a nice reminder to me to one, remember, like, despite the stresses that we might face, to bring it back to the joy of music, but also as an educator, like, we need to embrace that in all aspects, in our students and encouraging that exploration, but also in ourselves and continually wanting to learn and be better people, be better musicians, be better educators. As far as some other tools as for things that educators can do, if we can observe, allow ourselves time to observe, and recognizing that when we give an instruction, it might work really well for some people, and some people it may not, and that's okay. And recognizing that there may not be one perfect way to say something, but if we are observing how our students are responding, if we are noticing, like, oh, these few flutists are really doing well with the instruction I just gave, there's a couple others over here that are maybe kind of interpreting it a little bit differently. Maybe they have a different concept of what part of the tongue you're talking about when you're talking about articulation, or maybe have a different idea of what you say whenever you say lead the flute up with your thumb, something like that. Just recognizing that when you're watching that, you can respond, and you don't have to have the answer right then. You don't have to, but you can use different tools. You can use a mirror. You can use, demonstrations and mirroring, as far as, like, I'm going to do this, I want you to mimic me. I'm going to do it, and maybe, like, doing it the wrong way and have them mimic. Just allowing yourself to observe and respond in those moments. It can be a scary thing to explore sometimes, I think, but it's worth it. I found.
Well, and so many of our teachers are in triage mode that I have 30 minutes, I have to do this. And it's like, so to pausing and being in notice mode, I think is just a critical element, both for our own well-being, our own just ability to slow our own heart rate down, knowing that we go from class to class. You have 5 minutes for lunch, and God bless us if we have time to go to the bathroom, and then we're back at it. And that's the reality. So I think they're really wise words, just to kind of pause. I think of models and tradition of what we see. So you bring up flutists that, the flute needs to be parallel to the ground. Well, I can't tell you a professional flautist that I've seen whose flute is parallel to the ground, but that's how we set up our fifth graders. I see so many little bodies out on the marching band field carrying huge bass drums, and their backs are arched. And internally, I'm just like, well, thank you. You've just supported some chiropractor's kids' college tuition for the next 4 years. And these are the things that are in my mind when I'm seeing some of the things that we're asking our bodies to do, or violinists with carpal tunnel and all of those things and awareness. And obviously, we're not asking our music educators to be kinesiologists. We're not asking them to be Alexander technique folks. But I do think to start to explore some of these proper body setup. My mind, I don't know if either of you are familiar with Pat Sheridan. He's a tubist who does a lot of work with breath. And I saw him at the Texas Music Educator Association conference, and just mind blown. I mean, how many times, just as an example of something that might feel like it's close to this, how many times do we say, sit up straight and put your feet flat on the floor? Well, feet flat on the floor, according to Pat, isn't what's best for our support and our alignment. So actually that our knees need to be below our hips for our proper alignment. And so many of the things I say, tradition and models. I mean, that's what we're needing to undo. Feet flat on the floor, sit up straight. So a lot of this.
Neither is straight.
Jackie, if we say that again,
Neither
please, Shawn.
Is sit up straight. Your
right, exactly.
Your spine has four curves. It's not straight. There's nothing. There's actually no straight bone in your body. Every bone in your body is curved.
So if you had to, let's go with that, Shawn. I love it. So if we're in front of a group of fifth graders who just got their brand new clarinets, and we finally figured out how to put it on there without breaking the reed, and everyone's happy, how would you suggest we approach that class to get them set up just to simply sit in a way that is comfortable and, well, do no harm?
I think we would say, Jackie and I do this a lot, and we work a lot together a lot in this way. I would say, and Jackie, jump in here. I would say first, let's find our sit bones. Let's do a little wiggle, and notice that there are two bones on the bottom of your pelvis that you're sitting on, and we can rock those forward and kind of come off of them. You'll end up on your legs, or you can rock back, and you'll end up on your tailbone. We want to be in the middle. We want to be on those two sit bones. And then coming up out of those sit bones is your spine. It's connected to your pelvis and then comes up, and your head sits on there. And that spine is a curvy structure. Now we can really come down, and we can scrunch it. And then we can come up, let the head lead, the body follows, and we can go way up here and over straighten it. Now let's just soften that a little bit so we can feel those curves. And if you need to feel that again, we can scrunch down again. So we're really making it small and kind of one curve, and then coming up and flattening it out, and then finding that place in the middle where we're comfortable. We're not rigid, we're not straight, but it's a place of comfort where we can notice that we're still moving. There's little subtle micro movements that are happening here. You're slightly leaning forward and back. You can shift side to side. Everything stays nice and easy. That's where we want to start, and where we want to kind of keep coming back to. That's our neutral.
I love that. And, I mean, we always say, what's a takeaway? And so that's something that tomorrow I would go into my collegiate ensemble and say, well, let's just reevaluate how comfortable we are, how our spine is, and where our sit bones are. That's not the language that comes out of my mouth on a regular rehearsal. So this is something that I think we can really take to heart. Jackie, I would really like to explore just a little bit more about this idea of identity and being present when we go into either a rehearsal or a performance. In the SEL world, we talk about identity more about our self awareness, our self management. How are we thinking about how we're feeling? Can we give adequate names to our emotions, the intensity of those emotions, de escalation techniques, understanding our strengths, needs, and values, things like that. And I truly believe that we're in the same ballpark when we talk about body awareness with our identity. Can you help us explore that a little bit, Jackie?
Yeah. So one of the things that Shawn and I were really excited about writing towards the end of the book, when we got done with all of the body mapping, this is this bone, this is how it fits, this is how it works, all of that, and we started realizing that there's another part of this information that's really important, and that's exploring our self map. How do we identify ourselves? How do we describe ourselves? How do we think of ourselves? And realizing that all of that is such an integral part of how we approach performing. When I first kind of learned about this topic of self mapping and thinking about my identity, I really didn't want to go there. That was not a safe place in that moment for me, and I was like, whoa, okay, I don't want to go there. That just seems too deep. That seems too deep. And the more that I kind of hung out with the idea of who am I? How do I identify as myself? How do I think about myself? And what are some things that are good? I mean, I know I'm not the only musician who is, a perfectionist and is always thinking about what can be better, what can be better, what can be better. Well, to think about what are some things that are good aspects of myself and good aspects of my musicianship that I can share and that I want to share. And so I think that was something that was really important to both of us to explore. It was hard to explore. It was very vulnerable to write those things in the book. But it was important to us. It was important for us to be able to put that down in words in a way of almost holding ourselves accountable, of like, we've got to do this work too. And this is hard work. It can be hard work. It's not the easiest thing to dive into, but it's important as we think about ourselves as performers and musicians and educators, realizing that we need to know who we are so that we can identify and create a safe space for our students.
Jackie, it's fantastic when we talk about the teacher having to model vulnerability. And if we're going to ask our students to necessarily be vulnerable, music is vulnerable, right? There's no hiding in music, and you're at least sharing it with one person if we're in a private lesson or something like that. If not, a class of your peers. And for us to be able to model that vulnerability and say, this is work that I'm doing too on a daily basis when I'm going out and giving a recital or modeling or taking the podium with a baton. That's work that we're doing too. And then, Shawn, you started to brilliantly make this connection to belonging, that, we don't do this work in silos. We don't do this work and it's just, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to get my confidence up and I'm going to go out and be aware of who I am. We're doing this in community. And part of that community is realizing that our bodies are in a space and we're all being aware of where our bodies are. Can you dig a little bit deeper for us on this belonging? Because for us, belonging is in the SEL world is appreciating diversity, is understanding that all of our bodies are different and they function differently. And yet we're coming together and we're asking to produce a very similar product out of those bodies and those instruments. So that sense of belonging, it's kind of at a tear between that vulnerability and how we're coming together to all create one
Sure.
product.
I operate using a Brene Brown definition of belonging and separate it from fitting in. Like fitting in is conformity. But belonging is being valued and recognized for the ways in which we're different, as opposed to the ways that we're similar. And as an academic, we can certainly understand the thinking parts of that. But what we have to understand, and this goes back to the mind body connection, like those two things are not separate. you do not have a mind without a body, and you can't have a body without a mind. They are the same thing. And we need words to, to, to be able to talk about them, but that doesn't mean that they're separate. My sense of identity has both top down functions and bottom up functions. I think about who I am, therefore I do, but I feel things about who I am, therefore I realize things. And the belonging aspect of it is something that we feel. We get a sense in our body through our nervous system and through various nerves that are reading the social atmosphere in the room. And it tells us, I'm safe. And that percolates up to our thinking. And then we respond. Um, and that's how we know whether or not this community or this group of people, this room is safe for me and I belong here. That's something that we first sense and then translate into words. And if we're not if we're not aware that someone might not feel safe for things that are unsaid or not being recognized, those are the things that need to come to light so that we can understand them and then help people feel more comfortable in the spaces that they're in. And all of those things that our sense of belonging helps. It's making our nervous system is making choices about that that are happening much underneath our consciousness. I said that kind of clumsily. It's happening subcortical, so to speak. And then it percolates up to our mind and our awareness, and we're going, oh, I don't, this isn't, I don't feel safe here. And then we start to respond to that physically. You can see me kind of pulling away. Our mannerisms will organize around that sense of safety, and it will affect the way that we coordinate. It will affect the amount of freedom that we feel. Thus, as a performer, it will affect our access to our creativity, our access to our ease, and our access to our vulnerability.
Shawn, thank you. One of the things that I talk a lot about is that the human brain is a smoke alarm. And if we don't feel safe and we don't feel loved, that smoke alarm goes off and we don't have capacity for anything else, right? Our unilateral focus is on, I'm not safe, get
Survival.
out. And that leads to fight or flight, survival. That's it. Thank you for that incredibly nuanced, thoughtful background to kind of what I give an analogy to. It was spot on, Shawn. Now, Jackie, I want to get back to a little bit of the resource that we're going to be talking about in a little bit, but you mentioned spot on this idea of body mapping. And I think this is something that has kind of been spoken about in music education. And sometimes people kind of think that they're sniffing at it. But can you just give us a little bit better understanding of what body mapping is?
Sure. So, what body mapping is basically diving into some anatomical basics. It doesn't have to be anything super detailed, but we dive into that, and the idea behind that is by doing that, and we understand how our body is constructed, where the bones are, how they move, how the joints move, that in itself is going to release tension. It is going to allow us to move more freely. And by moving more freely, we can breathe more freely. We can allow our hands to move more freely, and that can enhance our musicianship in our performances and allow for us to create the music we want to create by using our body in a more efficient way.
I love that. And Shawn, did you have something to add to that one?
I said, I was agreeing.
We're all going to agree. It was the perfect definition. Here we go. Jackie, thank you. I think that really brings clarity. Now, the thing that for me as a band director, as a music educator, as a music teacher educator, my mind goes to, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Release tension. Yes, please. Especially now, I would. And my mind goes to, okay, so as a music teacher, what are some strategies that I can implement in the whole group? And we already, Shawn led us through this idea of sitting and understanding the curvature of our spine, which was absolutely brilliant. But Jackie and Shawn, would you indulge us and give us a few more examples of what this could look like for our music teachers to maybe try in their classrooms?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kind of dive in first. There's a demonstration I like to do that gives a very quick, down and dirty example of what body mapping is. And it's a very simple one. And what we can do is we can actually just look at the palm of your hand, and we're going to look at the joints of the fingers. Okay. So we see that we have these creases here, right at the top of our fingers. This is the first joint of the finger. Okay. And then we can go down to the second one, the second crease. This is the second joint of the finger. And then we have this third crease here. This right here, I want you to think of as the third joint right here. And if you move your fingers and move your hand, it can be any way you want, slow, fast, together, or separate. And move from this joint right here, this crease. Okay, so that's what we're focusing on. We're just noticing, how does it feel? How would we describe that movement? Okay, and it's just one of those just self-observation things. Okay, and you're just trying to move from that crease. Now take a look at the back of your hand, and we're going to look at these joints again. You can see at the top we have these creases here. This is where that first joint is, and then we have the second joint right here where we can kind of close our hand a little bit. And then if we close our hand all the way, we see these knuckles here, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to put one index finger on the middle knuckle of your hand, on the back of your hand. And then we're going to place the thumb on the complete opposite side. So it's nice and even. My index finger and my thumb are even. Now this space right here, this is where that joint truly is. I played a little body mapping trick before. I had you think that this is where the third joint is, but the third joint is actually here within the palm of the hand. So now if we move our hand around, and we can do the same kind of movement, but we're thinking, oh, I need to move my fingers from this third joint, then the movement is going to feel different than it did before. Because when our body map is saying that this is the joint, then our body is trying to make us move there as if there's a joint there, but there's actually a bone there. We can't move right there. There's not a joint there, but our body's trying to make that happen. So it's actually using extra effort in order to make that movement happen. So by just thinking about, okay, how is the hand truly constructed? How does it function? How does it move? Oh, this is where that joint really is. Oh, okay. That movement feels easier. And I can move my fingers effortlessly. I can move them together better. There's going to be more coordination possible and more facility possible as well.
Fantastic. And my mind goes to so many applications of that, whether it's playing clarinet or holding a baton or playing trumpet or playing piano. I mean, there's endless opportunities to imagine how that manifests in music making. Oh, so good. Shawn, do you have something for us?
I was going to bring in this idea of identity. And I had a teaching experience 2 nights ago that was really profound for me. It was an improvisatory moment. I was teaching a small group of people, and we had mirrors in the room. So I was like, oh, let's take advantage of this. And I had them stand in front of the mirror, and I had them walk a few times in front of the mirror and just notice themselves and, notice how they were moving. And then I said, okay, now pick up your instrument. And they were all string players. So they, and I said, look at what, just look at what you did to your body. Now let's keep that going, and but bring our arms down and take a walk. And everybody was kind of, they're like, oh, yeah, I don't like that. I was like, that's an identity. I'm doing the right thing as a violinist. And as one particular student was explaining it to me, I knew the student from working earlier with them, and I knew that this student was from Honduras, and they were speaking to me in English. And I said, pause. I said, start speaking to me in Spanish. Just explain your experience of this in Spanish. And as they did, their entire body softened. I said, and everybody went, and I said, take a walk. And he took a walk around the room. I said, now pick up your violin. And it was like night and day. And we were all like, we just had to stop and pause and unpack, like when we're trying to be a good musician, that's an identity in and of itself. A good violinist, a good clarinetist. I'm really good at this. I know how to straighten my neck. Like, you know, but being a good artist or a good Shawn needs to be first above all of those other, like, these are the right expectations of each of my or of my field or of my instrument. And it was just such a profound moment for all of us of realizing how much or how important this concept of identity is to how we organize in movement.
What a beautiful story. My mind goes to last summer, we hosted the National Seminario for El Sistema USA here at Lake Forest College. And there were predominantly Spanish speakers in the ensemble, and they were counting during just some stretches, and they were counting in English, and it was 1, 2, 3. And then someone just said, in Spanish. You should have seen the energy. You should have seen the effective
Yeah.
body language. There was a sense of belonging. There was a sense of this is my identity being honored. And it was tangibly felt in body language and energy, and absolutely just captures exactly what you just said, Shawn. Absolutely. If we're not honoring our identities, we're not going to feel safe, and our bodies are going to reflect that. Oh,
Yeah. And then
stunning.
we don't have access to our creativity, our
Right.
vulnerability, our spontaneity. Everything is everything is through a lens. It's what we were really getting at in our last chapter about the purpose and the power of our self map.
Well,
It's Yeah.
and that's just a perfect segue. We've been hinting at it this entire time. You wrote a book. And not only did you write a book, I think you wrote the book on how we can start to think of this, especially for clarinetists. But as I was thumbing through it, really beyond in a lot of different contexts, called Body Mapping for Clarinetists, New Frontiers in Clarinet Teaching. Whenever I hear anything New Frontiers, I'm all on board. Is right. So how can we do things in a way that has not been explored before, in a way that's going to get us to think in a different way? Jackie, share a little bit about the book, please.
Sure. So we provided a really comprehensive definition, approach, and many different ways that you can explore the content of body mapping in a way that is hopefully going to feel safe for you, and I think that it can be really applicable to other instrumentalists as well. I don't think it has to be just clarinetists. Yes, we do talk about clarinet, and yes, we mention clarinet a lot, but it also is applicable to, I think, all musicians, and it's a product of many years of experience that we've both lived and brought to the table. And there was many things that we had very similar thoughts on, and we would just write. And there was times in which we both had different experiences or different thoughts on things, and we would notate those. And just because some people may relate to my story more, or they may relate to Shawn's story more, and it was important to us that everyone have something to relate to. And so hopefully that is what we did. It was released in December, and so it is on the GIA website. And I actually do have a copy of it right here. I'm just shameless plug. But it is a labor of love. It's been a labor of love and in the making for many years, and we're very proud of it and glad it's out there.
Shawn, thoughts on the process? Thought on the book on your end?
We wrote it essentially for our colleagues. So there is a lot of information in it. And we knew that the information was going to challenge some kind of long held pedagogical beliefs. So we wanted to provide as much reason and anatomical information that we could provide. That may seem intimidating just because it's huge and it's a lot of information. None of that is necessarily important if it's just so that we didn't want to feel like we were pointing fingers and telling people you were wrong, or that we were trying to be sensationalist or anything like that. We wanted to say, we're like you. We taught these things. We did this, and then we discovered this world of body mapping and Alexander technique, and things can be different. And it doesn't have to be this hard. It doesn't have to hurt. It doesn't have to cause injury, and it doesn't have to be a struggle. You as a musician get to enjoy the process of making music just as much as the audience does. If we can just get those thinking bits, our bodies out of the way, and get our bodies kind of tuned up to the process. That was our goal with the book. And yeah, we're really excited about it.
It
Go ahead. Sorry.
fantastic. It's fantastic. I mean, I just I'm so excited just that this exists now in a way that is spoken to a vernacular audience, right? It makes sense. It's for your colleagues, you said, but when I was thumbing through, it's really accessible too. And I think sometimes that's the challenge, is we don't find this work accessible. We don't take classes on anatomy and when we're learning to be a music teacher. And this is an accessible way for us to kind of enter that. My friends, this has been such a gift to me to learn. But also I cannot wait for our audience to be able to hear some of these practical ideas, but also the importance of how it melds with identity and belonging. What's next for the two of you? Where can we find you, and where can we find more of this great information?
So I am, like I said, I'm teaching at the University of Southern Mississippi. You can find me on their website, or jackiemapsmusic.com is also my website. We have another book that we're actually working on, The Embodied Breath. And so we're writing a book about the concept of breathing and how we can incorporate that and teach that and experience that in a new way.
And Shawn, where can we find you?
I'll pick up right there. The sort of after the colon in that title is body mapping, balance, breathing, and belonging. Like we're going to be combining all of this, because this idea of belonging and the piece of it really came to fruition after we'd already turned in the draft. This is really new cutting edge for us. It's really the razor's edge. And we're going to kind of dive in. We are diving in the breathing book. About a year ago, I opened my own training company and education company called Embodied. It's a play on words. It's the letter M and then BODYED. So it's a strange spelling, but embodied.com. And that company is for people who are interested in learning to teach body mapping, to teach Alexander technique, and possibly even become certified. And so I'm really excited about my next step in bringing this work to musicians and actors and dancers and performers of all kinds, and giving them the tools to be able to teach this information to their students and really begin to change the field of performance education.
Unbelievable. A lot of my work is interarts. So when I hear the talk about breath, it's the great unifier, right? We all use our breath in one way or another to create our art. And thank you just proactively for the work that you're doing. And can't wait to see that book in print. And the Game Changer Part 2. My friends, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Such a gift. Please check out the show notes for all of the websites that were mentioned. And Jackie, Shawn, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
For Music for All, I'm Scott Edgar. Have a great day. Bye-bye.